So today we'll start the next chapter, which is tax invoice, credit and debit note. So the first topic is invoices under GST. So in GST, what all things are there in invoices? So invoice. Before we go into the GST part, we understand what is invoice. So invoice is basically a commercial document. It's not a personal document. It's not something which is for rough use. It's commercial document. It's for commercial use, issued by a seller to buyer. Because whenever you go to purchase anything, to buy anything from market, you will get an invoice. And who will give you the invoice? The seller from whom you are getting that thing purchased. What all things it contains? Name of trading parties, that is me and the other person whom I'm purchasing. Description and quantity of items sold. Date of shipment. Mode of transport. Price. Discount if any. Delivery and payment terms. So these are the general things which are there on any invoice which you get. So invoice is a commercial document issued by a seller to buyer and contains these all things. Now, what is tax invoice under GST Act? Because GST Act don't say about invoice, it says about tax invoice. So it simply says tax invoice means a tax invoice which is referred in section 31. Now the question is, what is an invoice under section 31? So under section 31, what it says? Section 31 says, number one, it is mandatory to issue tax invoice for every supply of goods or services in GST. So if you are registered in GST, then for every single supply, you have to issue tax invoice. You cannot skip it. In case of composition or exempted supply dealer, in lieu of tax invoice, bill of supply will be issued. So even that, then also invoice will be issued, but the name of invoice will be bill of supply. So if you are a regular dealer of GST, you have to issue for every supply the invoice, the tax invoice. For composition dealer and exempted supply dealer, you must issue bill of supply. In case of registered person buying goods or services from unregistered person, the registered person need to issue tax invoice under reverse charge mechanism. Now think of a situation where the situation is reverse. The seller is unregistered. So normally what happens, seller issues invoice to buyer. But if the seller is unregistered in GST and buyer is registered, then buyer has to issue invoice to seller. So this is called reverse charge mechanism. When it happens, whenever an unregistered person is a seller and registered person is the buyer. So if you being a registered person purchase something from an unregistered person, you have to issue the tax invoice. What all things invoice should contain? Description, quantity only for goods because services don't have quantity, value, other prescribed particulars. So what all other things? We will talk about that what all prescribed particulars are. You don't need to issue invoice if supply value is less than 200, subject to some conditions. So more than 200, you must issue invoice. Less than 200, you need not issue any invoice. Now, what is importance of tax invoice under GST? It's evidence of supply, because whether you are made supply or not, there is no such evidence. So this is the only evidence that you have made supply. It's essential to avail input tax credit, because input tax credit is also available for inward supplies for purchase. So tax credit. If you don't have a tax invoice, you cannot avail input tax credit. Essential to know time of supply to arrive at chargeability. You must have to know the time of supply to arrive at chargeability, because chargeability has to have an impact of time. For example, today Today, something is taxable at 18%, but tomorrow it's taxable at 12%. Now, at what rate should I pay the tax? So invoice is something which will determine when did you supply the goods, today or tomorrow. If the tax invoice is dated today, it must have been supplied today. If the tax invoice is dated tomorrow, then supply must have been made tomorrow. In that case, the tax rate would be applicable accordingly. So time of supply is very important for chargeability. And to know the chargeability, to know the time of supply, tax invoice is very essential. So in goods, GST will be chargeable at the time of supply of goods. And in services, GST would be chargeable at the time of supply of service or receipt or payment, whichever is earlier. So time of supply is very important to know chargeability. So invoice is the indicator. Now there is one more thing to know in terms of tax invoice. Harmonized system of nomenclature, HSN. So on every invoice, every goods, every service has a HSN code. So on invoice for every goods and service, we must mention, we must mention we must mention the HSN code. Now, what is HSN code? It is developed by World Customs Organization. It's not made by India. It's not made by any state of India. It's made by the World Customs Organization. It's a systematic classification of goods and services all over the world. It's not about one country. It's for every country. It's a 6-digit code classifying 5,000 plus goods accepted worldwide. So every single goods has a 6-digit code that is accepted worldwide. We have modified further. We have added 2 more digits to detail it more further for the purpose of Indian things, because there are so many things in India which cannot be directly related with all these codes. So we have classified more 2 codes and given our own codes. So 6 digits are given by the World Customs Organization, 2 more digits added by India. Now there is 2-tier structure to follow HSN. So this HSN code has to be mentioned everywhere, in returns, in the invoice, everywhere, wherever you are writing something about the goods or supply or service supply. Now, who has to mention how? If your turnover in last financial is up to 5 crore, you have to mention 4 digits of HSN for every goods or service, whatever you are providing. If your turnover in last financial year is more than 5 crore, 6 digit has to be mentioned. In case of export or import, 8 digits are compulsory. If taxable value is less than 200, which we just talked, you don't need to issue a tax invoice if the recipient is a registered person. Recipient does not require invoice. Okay, there is some mistake. So recipient is unregistered person. Recipient does not require invoice, and the supplier issues a consolidated invoice of all such supplies at the day end. So when the day ends, he will calculate the total of taxable value of less than 200 supplies, 150, 180, 170, and all these supplies. He will club them together and make a consolidated invoice of all these supplies at the day end. And the recipient don't want and require invoice, and recipient is an unregistered person. In that case, up to value of 200, less than 200, no need to issue invoice. Now, what all things should be in a tax invoice? So that we will study in the next class. Now, if there are any doubts, please let me know.